Welcome back to The Way to Wellness, where we're finding ourselves through the balance of every season. And today I am so excited and honored to welcome Mary Beth Pinto, a friend of mine, because I think she speaks very eloquently to the thing that we are all challenged with. How we change, how it drives our life, how it changes our desires or even throws us off course. So Mary Beth, thank you for being here today. Mary Beth is a lifelong learner, a mentor, an emeritus professor, and like me, one of her favorite things in life is being a grandmother, right, Mary Beth?
Absolutely. Call me BB. That's
I love it. So is that your name, BB?
BB.
Oh, some women, they get challenged with that whole grandmother thing, but I embrace it. I think it's such a blessing to have that patience and that space and that time, but it is also very significant to what we're going to talk about today. All the roles we play in life and how no one really prepared us for that. Can we talk about that, right?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful to be here and I'm so looking forward to this time. So let's just get started. I mean, when you say no one prepared us, because there's no owner's manual, there's no rule book, there's no, oh my God, how do I manage this? What do I do? And I don't know about your relationship with your mother, but my mom struggled in her own way. So she didn't sit me down and go over the rules or the suggestions. I mean, the poor thing, I remember when she was trying to tell me about the change that I was going to start experiencing, she called me to the basement while she was cleaning windows. She couldn't look me in the eye. She was so just uncomfortable. So I think it's just a transition is rough. Life, the journey is up and down. So anyway, happy to be here to talk with you.
Well, I'm excited because I think one of the things that I'm with, and especially with this podcast, is that, you had your mom, and I think that's fantastic. And as humorous it is to think about going into the basement and having it be a sidebar to a cleaning lesson, we all have those experiences where we get little bits of information. I actually learned much of my transitional from being with the women in my career and having all kinds of different mothers, because mine passed away when I was young. And I think that one of the things I'm with is, even if we get a little hint, it's still our own personal journey. Like, when you think about all the roles that you have played in your life, Mary Beth, let's talk about that. As you develop those roles, how did it change your ability to focus on yourself?
Well, certainly, and we've talked about this before, I think life is seasonal. And so at different seasons, different roles are prominent. And if you think back to your college days, your school days, there's certain things that are critical to you at those times. But when you're a young professional, those critical things, the priorities change. Likewise, when you start your marriage, things change. Motherhood, things change. So, I would say that life is basically one change after another. And as those changes occur, we take on different roles. And I don't think you can come up with a rule book for a lot of these things. It's like you have to experience it. You have to fail and pick yourself back up and try something. And if it worked, great. And if it didn't, well, we're going to look elsewhere. So I don't know if that answers your question, but to me, life is about change, whether we like that change or not.
100%. And I think the challenge that we meet is that we have all this cultural, societal noise about what it's supposed to look like. And that is one of the reasons why you and I have talked about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were the spark of the podcast idea, is how do we quiet all of that noise down? And, we're sitting right now in this season coming off the close of the year. And really, instead of jumping off and making new goals and getting more stuff done, just encouraging people, let's just kind of sit with ourselves quietly. The holidays are gone. There isn't a lot coming up on our schedule. The colder days, at least in our region, allow for a little bit of slow time. And how do you or what advice do you offer, right, as a seasoned woman who has been many things, a professional, a mother, and now a grandmother? How do you advise me to allow myself the permission to be something that the world is telling me maybe I shouldn't?
Let's just reflecting back, like on our mothers, on that generation of people. I don't think they had as much noise because they didn't have the digital ages, right? With the social media. I mean, yes, TV came in the 60s, but they didn't have they had the radio. But how much of the shoulds were they given? Well, their mothers or maybe their sisters or their neighbors talked to them about the shoulds of being a wife, the shoulds of being a mother. But you didn't get this constant bombarding and the images of what you should look like, what a mother should look like, what a mother should do. And I think it's really hard in our digital age to quiet all that. And for me, one of the biggest things is to turn it off, to try to step away from all of that. Like, am I on social media? Yes, but it doesn't command my life. What are the things that are taking up so much of your time that are causing you this uneasiness, this questioning, these wonderings about, am I doing this right? The shoulds, that's, my husband always says to me, there you go again with that word, Mary Beth. I thought you said you weren't going to put that in you were going to take that out of your, your language, your terms, because I think the shoulds cause shame, and then shame, all these other things happen inside. So to me, that's the problem, is that there's too much out there. Second of all, I am a believer, and I'm such a strong believer in this, and I really thank God for leading me this way, that we need help. We need people to talk to. And when I was in graduate school, and many years ago, I'm 67. So when I was in graduate school, I turned for help at the counseling center at the University of Pittsburgh. And I started at that time to get a life coach, because that's really what I think people are. They're life coaches. And that has changed my life. In fact, in my family, I know one of your later guests on the podcast is going to be Barbara Bauda. My family still says, even my kids say this, well, what would Barbara say? Because she was my life coach for a 20-year period. And so when you say, how did you manage that? I think, number one, it's trying to take all that off of you, that terrible stuff that's bombarding us. And number two, to seek help, for somebody to help you filter through all that and help you see things differently. And for me, it has truly been a life coach. A life coach is needed. And I encourage all my kids to get a life coach. I've said it to them for years. Some have, some haven't, but I think it's critical.
Mary Beth, when we talk about that a little bit, I think the great thing about you, and I always love talking to you, is that you're really solid in knowing just exactly what you want or what you need. It might come from verbalizing all the thoughts and the reflections. And I just want to share on top of that suggestion to get the help is, you really don't get good help until you are willing to be real with yourself, right? What do I want from this relationship? Am I looking for affirmation? Am I ready to take action for change? Am I just looking for some explanation for some of the things that I don't understand? And I think one of the things that I find, especially as a coach myself, when people come to me, my one question is, okay, what are we looking to get out of this today? And sometimes I will get that person who goes, I don't know, and then I want to impart that empowerment. This is your journey. I think golden rule number 2 is, what do I want them to do with this information? That is something I'm always thinking about. So when you talk about all the shoulds, when we're sharing with other people in our spaces, one of the things we have to check in with is, what is it exactly that we want from them, right? Because we don't do anything without a self-generated purpose. We like to think that we're completely selfless human beings, but we're really not. A lot of the times, what we do in our lives, we do not only for others, but for ourselves. So I love checking in with us, with our mental self, and saying, what do I want them to do with this information? So I love the idea of get it out of your own head, whether or not it's through journaling or with a life coach, or if you have a lot of trauma in your past, or you have situations that you feel very helpless with counseling. There's this whole mental stigma around, oh, if I go to counseling, it means like I'm crazy. No, it doesn't. It's literally a third party system who is not invested, that can help you sort through the noise that past experiences have created. Because let's face it, like, I even think about some of our conversations when we talk about where we should be in our age, right? And then you and I have talked how many times and said, look at all the things you do at your age. Like, I am going to be 55 and I still play pretty actively on the playground with my grandchildren. And if I take a moment to pause, there are a lot of 55-year-olds who just have them come over and do coloring because they can't do it. We don't really reflect on what we can, and we also don't unpack what keeps us from doing. And I love your suggestion, because ultimately, wouldn't you say that where you were 20 years ago and where you are now, did that same picture appear in the reality of today?
Oh, I have changed dramatically. I mean, even if it's just tweaking this or tweaking that, my core being, I think, has stayed the same, but I have changed for the good. And I think I would add to that is, I am someone who cannot be comfortable with being miserable. I mean, if I'm miserable, I got to look to change something. I just can't stand it. And so for me, seeking help, it's like, like if my back is killing, I don't have back pain, thank God. But if I had terrible back pain, I would be looking to see, what could I do about it? Is there a PT? Is there a doc? What would I do? Because I can't live in that state. And so I don't know if that's what it is for me. I also think I deserve better. I think I deserve better. And I can't understand why people live in this space that they're so miserable all the time. And, you see them and you feel so bad for them. And I'm like, well, you could do things to change it, but they don't. So my journey, the hard thing about my journey has been where I felt I needed to take on everybody else's misery and make them better. Because I'm a fixer, I'm a decision, I'm a solver, a problem solver. So if I see XYZ, I'm like, wow, they could do A, B, or C. And if they did A, B, or C, they'd be better. And Barbara Bada said to me one time, she goes, but they're good where they are. And I go, but that's wrong. And
Well, that is so one of the things, our emotional management system, we have to check in with when we're carrying other people's things. We want them to have the same experience that we are, that same joy that we are. But sometimes when we look at people and they appear to be miserable, are they miserable? Are they comfortable in their own space? And are we just not okay with that? I mean, that's a true check-in with ourselves as we're going out and expending our energies. Are we spending a lot of time emotionally managing other people's circumstances that they're okay with? Like the whole, not my monkeys, not my circus. Because when we do that, when we invest a lot in fixing other people's lives, we're taking away from the time and opportunity for us to focus on our own visions of our own health and our own wellness and our boundaries and so forth. So what is one thing, if you could give me one sentence that you had to relearn in your midlife self, what is one thing?
Oh, definitely. You're not my monkey, not my circus thing. I mean, that was something one of your colleagues, Mary Dwyer, said to me one time over and over. And it's taken me a long time to learn that. But to give up that emotional energy to somebody else who really doesn't want it. And number two, isn't asking for it. You know, they're not asking you. And I see that a lot with my adult children. You know, I see misery in certain areas. They don't want to know my thoughts. So I have to sip it because it's not my monkey. They're the ones living that. And they're making those choices. So that would definitely be it. And that's been a hard one.
Is it freeing or uncomfortable to be in that space?
I think it's both.
Okay.
It's definitely uncomfortable. And my husband and I repeat it to each other all the time, like, Mary Beth, remember? And I'll say it to him too, but he's not as much as I am. His emotional, and, you know, he doesn't try to manage other people's emotions like I do. But it's uncomfortable, but it is so freeing. It's like when the grandkids all get in the car and they drive away. Great having you. Glad you're going.
I'm going to go take a nap now.
No, we usually have to clean. That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like, I'm thrilled to have you. I was so excited you were here. So excited. Bye-bye.
I think that, you know, that's one of the things. And this is probably both genders. Like, when I think about this, right, I think as women, our roles are servitude. We're in service to you. As men, protective, right? We're the money makers and the protectors, fixers on both levels. So I don't think that that's really just gender specific. I think I see it in my dad all of the time, actually. He's quite lost when he's not trying to help us girls, his daughters, fix things in our life, or actually very frustrated when we don't seem to come to him for advice. And so I think one of the things that, as we're reflecting on the seasons of life, and regardless of what decade or generation people are in, is that awareness that no matter what we do to try to solidify our position in other people's lives, it changes. And as those roles change, unless we're willing to acknowledge it and understand and appreciate the role that it plays back in our own life, a lot of people can feel very lost, you know? And I'm always concerned with that, like retirement, for instance. When I talk to individuals about retirement, and I think you can speak to this, you know, I tell them it's an identity loss. And are you ready for that? Are you ready? So if this is the year that you're retiring, or that you're changing jobs, or maybe even changing relationships, have you come to terms with that piece and that part of you that will not be anymore? Like, how did that feel for you when you retired? And what kind of things did you go through in terms of kind of hang on to that being? Tell me about that, Mary Beth.
That truly was horrible. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. I really think it was a horrible thing. I retired. I planned that I was retiring, so it wasn't like it was a quick thing. I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. I'm going to be retired. I'm going to have all this free time. And it turned out that I hated it. Like, I felt no purpose in my life. I felt like, you know, I can't just sit here and clean my house. I mean, it was a horrible time of not knowing what to do. And my career as a teacher, as a professor at Penn State, probably the focus of my career was, although I did research and I had to do it and I did quite a bit of it, my real love was teaching. It was interacting with the students. It was that relationship building. And so much that I love to celebrate the students. I love to celebrate where they went and what they did and what they accomplished. And I still have close connections with several of them. And so that celebration was like, cut, because I didn't have this one-on-one connection with the students. I wasn't helping them with their resumes, doing job interviews with them. role playing, blah, 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 blah. I didn't have kids coming to my door because they had just been released from prison and they were, in for selling drugs. And now they're trying to manage their life and they're struggling. I mean, I had people come to me for help and advice all the time. And that was all cut off. And so you really do feel isolated then. And it was a rough time. And so, as you know, I came to you saying, well, what's my purpose? I don't know what my purpose is. I have to come up with a purpose because I was so busy in my life when I was working and had 3 kids and had a husband and had a house and all this stuff that I wanted to be perfect, that I always had lists and I had this to do and I like checking things off. And, I'm a Myers-Briggs J, big J, like to keep things organized. Well, I didn't have anything to organize because all that was sort of gone. And that was rough for me. It really was rough. And
so how did you make it through? Like, what do you feel shifted? What do you think was like your big aha moment where, one of the things our meeting up was health was the priority, right? Thinking about weight, thinking about the consciousness of self. Do you think you waited to retire to prioritize yourself?
No, I mean, I certainly, when you become an empty nester, a lot of women go into depression over that. I knew one of my friends, her mom literally stayed in bed for weeks when her youngest went away to college because she was so depressed. I wasn't. I was waving them goodbye. Like I was loving it. Okay. Because number one, I loved college. It was such a great experience. And I wanted them to have that experience away from me. I didn't want them home. So, the empty nester part was freeing for me and gave me more time for myself. Again, I had moved to Georgia. I was working remote. It was COVID. Then it was not COVID and I'm still remote. And I got a counselor. I was like, I'm in a new space. I need a counselor to help me through this transition. And, one of the things she said to me was, her name is Deborah. She said to me, you're not okay with just being, are you, Mary Beth? And I said, well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? She goes, well, doing, being.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're a doer. And
Yeah.
you got that right, sister. I'm not somebody that could ever sit and watch television. I was a terrible just be, like sit here. I felt like I had to have my hands moving. And so she has helped me a lot through that process and investigating different things and, kind of understanding what are my fears of retirement? What are the fears that have just like taken over me and helping me process through that? The fear of not having enough money, the fear of not, all these things, the fear of, oh my God, I'm retired. So does that mean I'm dying now? It's like I saw that great meme. I think I sent it to you. That meme that said something about, I can't remember exactly how it went, but basically like, okay, I'm retired. So what's next? I'm dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
That fear of that. And then the messages my mother used to send to me when I would hear her talk to me saying things like, oh, well, so-and-so lived in that house. He retired and then he died. Or he retired and then his wife died. So all those fears came in. And I have to say, once again, it's going back to a life coach, having somebody help me walk through that. And then when I took on this one job, and I ended up not staying with it, it was part-time supposedly, but it was really more full-time. She said to me, Mary Beth, it's interesting. I just think maybe you don't really want work. Like you say you want to work, you say you need to work, you say all that, but then you're now enjoying more of that flexibility. You're enjoying things where before you weren't. You thought, oh no, I need to work. I need to work. I need to work. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. When and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that being part, it's an uncomfortable space. Wouldn't you agree?
For me, it is.
Yes. And I think for a lot of people, because again, there's all of this pressure have purpose. Like, it's my industry, right? We've talked about this. Billions of dollars are spent trying to encourage you to doubt your own self, your own abilities, and come to someone like me, quite honestly, so that I can help you find your purpose. But in essence, what I tell my clients all the time, well, maybe your purpose is just breathing, right? And that's okay. I think women will sometimes resist giving themselves permission to just be. And I can say that. I headed out on the ice yesterday afternoon to ice fish. It's a Tuesday. In my mind, Monday through Friday are work days. And, my staff, they were in the office seeing people. And here I am in the middle of Lake Erie, hunched over an ice hole looking for fish. Never would have done that, by the way. Never. Probably 4 years ago. Because if I wasn't striving and driving for the dollar, right, then I was doing something wrong. I came from that mentality. And, it's amazing to me, Mary Beth, how many women look to other people for permission to just be. Like, when my kids don't need me anymore, I can be. When my employer doesn't need me anymore, I can be. And as we age, even when my parents, right, because we become caregivers to our parents, when my parents don't need us anymore, we can be. And I even say that to gentlemen who are watching this podcast. When my kids don't need me, I can be. Whereas I think we miss a little bit of benefit to learning how to be in parallel for being for others. Do you know what I'm saying there? We are much happier, more peaceful, more productive when we can learn to be in our own space and be ourselves with appropriate boundaries and still be there for other people. But it takes planning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you have to plan your structure of your life?
I think, again, we moved to Georgia, moved to Atlanta, so we would be near the grandkids. And so, yes, I do, because there's several other players now in the picture, right? We have all these grandkids and they have activities and, blah, 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 blah. And we chose to live 22 miles north of the city. So my daughter will say to me, well, you're the one who chose to live 22 miles north of the city. And I'll say to her, and I used to feel bad about that, but I don't anymore, because I said to her, yes, Emily, and we've really developed a wonderful life for ourselves up here. That's what I said. And her response was, well, I mean, of course you should. Before, I would have taken that as like, So now we have to plan, okay, well, what's good for us and how can we assist? How can we help celebrate the moments? So driving down, for example, for a basketball game last weekend, it took us an hour and 40 minutes. It should have taken us maximum 30 to 40, but it took an hour and 40 because of traffic. So that wasn't good planning. And so I need to do better planning at times, because I want to, prioritize myself, my husband, our relationship, our friends up here, and also then enjoy and assist with what's happening, 18 to 20 miles south of us. So
that's I love that. Isn't it amazing how speaking up to our children gets a little easier as we get older? What is one of the boundaries you wish you'd have learned a little bit earlier that might have changed or brought forward your own self-importance?
I was raised, and you brought this up, and it's so true. I was raised other focused. That's my family. I was raised in a very service-minded family where you put others above yourself, period. Mm-hmm. So when my mother would come in the door, I mean, my dad died when I was 12. So, that was a rough time. And, but when he was alive, if, we were whatever, she would work at his office, and she might come home and say, well, what are you doing there? Like, why are you sitting there? well, I'm sitting watching TV or I'm whatever. And she'd be like, well, you should be up hanging the clothes out. There's clothes in the washer. Why aren't you hanging those clothes out? So everything was not about me. It was more about how can I serve the home? How can I serve the family? How can I serve the neighbor? How can I serve everybody else? And so that boundary has been hard for me. And putting the boundary up and not feeling shameful about it. Like, oh, I'm a terrible person because I didn't go and send a card to so-and-so who is sick in the hospital. Or, and my husband would never, ever think about sending a card to someone in the hospital because his family wasn't service focused. They weren't. It wasn't part of their DNA. And it was for me. And so that has been hard. And and I'm still hard for me, how to put that boundary up where you're helpful to others, but it's not overwhelming.
So what keeps you in check? Because we all have this personal accountability that we have to offer ourselves. When you say it's hard for you, what are some things that you would suggest to somebody who would feel the same way, that has a hard time not always saying yes and not always putting themselves at the last rung? If you could go back, right, and tell yourself at the younger you, hey, learn to do this a little bit better, how would you do that? Like, what are some things that you would share out in your wisdom of recognition that it needed to be changed, right? Because in part, you were probably making yourself and everyone around you kind of crazy and having to do the all things. What would you share? Just little tidbits.
It's difficult. I think that it's okay for you to need exercise, to need time away, it's okay for you to need things and not to always feel like, no, I got to serve them. I can remember when I took one of my sabbaticals, a woman who her kids were dying. It was very, very sad. And I basically gave my whole sabbatical to this lady. I was at her house every day. I was trying to do this. And in hindsight, I look back on that and I think, probably wasn't a good choice. Not that I couldn't have helped her, but I shouldn't have gone in 150% because I needed that sabbatical for me too. And so that's what I would say. It's okay for you to champion yourself. You need things too. My husband does this all the time. Like we were talking about the grandkids and something was going on. And he goes, well, I'm going to do the Peloton. Like I'm not available this morning because I'm exercising. And I said, oh, well, you could do it in the afternoon. Well, I don't want to. I want to do it in the morning. And he's fine with that. He feels good with that.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would be like, oh, but I feel bad. They asked me to come down this morning, blah, 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 blah. And so again, being okay with saying, I need this. That's what I would say.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's okay for all of us to give ourselves permission just right now. And that's where I'm going to pause for just a second. And I want everybody just to say or write down, I matter also. I think that is huge. And, the old adage of you can't give from an empty cup, just like on the airplane, to put the face mask on first. We hear that. We hear that over and over and over again. We don't practice it. And really how you practice it is you do it once and then you don't apologize. We're going to talk about it in a later episode of learning to say no without guilt, because the minute that you say no, but then you negotiate the no, you bring on the guilt yourself. So, if someone calls and says, hey, I really need you, and then that you can't make it happen, but you feel badly, so you'll say, well, no, and then you call him back and be like, well, I could give you an hour. Well, no, you should have stuck with the no. We don't negotiate the no. That's huge. Just like I think it's important as we're sitting with, what do I want to bring forward from last year? What are the things in my life that are non-negotiable that I want to experience, that I want to have? And what are the things that I've learned about myself to let go of? And I love a lot of your reflections are just that you've learned a lot about yourself. Mary Beth, in this coming year, what are some things that you want to experience? And how are you going to make that happen?
I want to play. I want to have fun. I believe life should be celebrated. And, it's easy to say that, but it's not always easy to implement because lots of stuff is going on in our world, or lots of things are happening wherever we are, involved. And it's hard. So here's an example. I was at our charity yesterday that we work at every Wednesday, and a lot of people couldn't come. So we were very short staffed. And we were short on donations, very short on donations. So there was a lot of stuff going on. Well, I wore my heart headband that wiggled back and forth. And people looked at me like, I was a little bit of a crazy lady. So I would go out with my cart. So the way this works is they put their orders in, and then we go shopping for them in the back where it's like a little grocery store. And we make the purchases for them. So if they say they want produce, we pick what produce, because we don't know how much we have of one thing or another. So anyway, I have my cart and I have my number, and like I call out 5-4 because we believe in respect, and we're not going to give you their name. So I have my little cart and I go out and I go 5-4, 5-4. Well, this lady looks up and she sees me in these little things. And she's a Ukrainian lady. God bless her. She stood up laughing. She hugs me. Oh, what she's going on in Ukraine. And I can't tell you how good that made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, you know what? I'm celebrating. Even though we're short-staffed, so people are waiting a little longer. We don't have a lot of donations, so we didn't have as much good stuff to give these people. I'm trying to celebrate. And so my concern with all of that is that it's easy to celebrate when things are going well.
Right.
But so many of us are facing very rough times. And whether it's financially or health issues, and, so many things. And how do you celebrate in those moments? How do you have joy in those moments? And so that's something for this coming year. I really want to, I want to keep my playful personality, but I also want to learn how do we feel content and also feel joy when you're struggling, when you're interacting with people who are really struggling. And so that's
I think that's beautiful. And I can tell you that, I'm the woman who wore the clown nose. I was running a clinic, and, my staff is all going crazy because we have this one physician who's like a little bit erratic and throwing everybody off. And here I walk out and, I've got my Patch Adams nose on. And, I think one of the things that we tend to focus far too much on is what we think other people need or want from us. And, that's the persona of professionalism and not laughing. And I really love that you said that, because the one thing that we always have control over is the attitude that we bring to the circumstances. And, I get it. There are things to be appropriate with and times to maybe not bring it. But at the same time, smile is a universal language. Hello is a universal language. And I think in our world of, electronics, where we can have our heads down and not paying attention, when we are really trying to come into what do we want from this life and how do we want to be, we don't find it, in this. This is not where it's at. It's in these individual conversations. Like, I have learned, it's so funny. you came to me from a coaching standpoint, but I've learned just as much, if not more, from you. And part of that is setting that intention to be present in the interactions and all the things that we're learning from other people around us. If we show up to receive instead of, I always think about going back to networking. We used to get together with his networking group, and 2 hours of time is a lot to give. And one day I was sitting there and I was looking around and I was watching all these people, and I was like, you know what, they're just waiting to speak. They're not hearing anything that I'm saying. They're here waiting, right, to be heard, without recognizing that the true relationship, the true networking, the way they're going to get business is to learn about other people. And when you share that, when you say, you want to experience that joy, that's not something that people give to us. It's something we bring to the table through our interactions. And I think it's also something that allows us the freedom and the flexibility to start becoming more authentic in our own deliverance of self. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to be meaning, what's the word that I'm looking for? We have to mean what we say and mean how we act. It has to be truthful to who we are. But I also think people don't want to give away much. So for example, it's probably, I don't want to say it's my only addiction, but I like Diet Coke. So I try to, only have a couple a week, but I will go through the McDonald's lane to get my Diet Coke. And sometimes they're grumpy and sometimes they're not. And when they're not grumpy, I always say to them, I love your smile. Keep that smile. Keep smiling. Because I want people to feel reinforced by what they're giving out. Because I think so often people don't.
Right.
They don't give back anything. And so I just think that when we're out meeting people, networking, you have to be authentic, because you can't be faking it. You need to be authentic. But look, I'm a bubbly person. It's just who I am. So it's hard. It would be hard for me in a networking situation to sit there and not open my mouth. But you're there to learn and you're there to listen. So, but there's active listening, right? Where you can be writing things down and, blah, blah, blah. So I think you have to be authentic and true to yourself in these interactions.
If you could speak to a woman who's listening to us right now and she feels like she's a little bit in between seasons and she's not really sure how to figure out just exactly who she's becoming or what she wants from this year, where would you tell her to start?
So, and I don't know if, I think this is okay on the podcast rules, if you will, but I truly believe in God, a higher power. It's part of who I am. And so where I would first tell this person, man or woman, is to really reflect on that and ask for help in this transition. I pray about help in the transitions all the time. Like, what should I be doing? Where should I be going? Because I do believe in the seasons of life. And now when you look in the rearview mirror and you look past, God placed people in my life who I needed in that season. And you have to be open to these people, open to meeting them, open to interacting with them, open to sharing your vulnerabilities with them, not acting like people do on Facebook. Oh, everything's wonderful. Well, we know it's not all wonderful for them, but it appears wonderful when you see these people on these social media sites. So that's really what I would say. Pray about it, meditate on it, think about it, and look for people in your life that get put into your life because they help you along the way. And then they're gone. They may move away, they may take another job, whatever. It's happened to me throughout my whole life, and I didn't recognize it until I was in my 40s. And my sister was dying of pancreatic cancer. And I was really struggling. And I had two people that came into my life, and they're not in it anymore. But the one said to me, you know, Mary Beth, it's seasons. God puts people in your life at different seasons, and I'm going to be with you every step of the way here. And that was so meaningful to me.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And she was. Now she's in Australia. She moved back to where her family was. And when we go to Australia, we're hoping we'll meet up with her.
That'll be so fun.
And that would be so cool. You know, and I felt so sad she was moving, because I just felt that significance in my life and how she helped me. So I think that there are people, and if you don't see them, then you certainly need to be working with a life coach or somebody else who helps you see these people, because I believe they're there, but we're not always open to it.
I think that that's a very critical message, right, Mary Beth, is you need to be open, and you're fine sharing your own faith. I think where I stand on that is we all have different levels of faith and spiritual connection. And I certainly do get up every morning and ask for my words to be the right ones and my actions to be the right ones, and staying open to that. But I think regardless of where anyone is in their own journeys, we are not unique in our bubble in this world. We are in an energetic exchange. And regardless of whether or not you tie that to God and faith or spiritual energy, or maybe you don't believe in anything beyond us, you cannot deny that energetically we are fueling each other. And, you know, one of the things that I'm thinking about when we talk about the seasons of our lives and the balance is that sometimes we get so caught up in paying back instead of paying forward. And that can really hinder us in thinking that we have to hold space for this obligatory repayment system because someone came in and was nice to us, when in fact that's universal. So all of the kindness, all of the little things that you've done that have gone out into the world and been done for other people, that comes back to you in other ways. It doesn't, you know, it's not like a me, you thing. So I have to answer the phone and commit to you every single time you ask because you did this great big thing, like your friend in Australia being there for you. No, that's not how it works. And it also, that kind of mentality really, really restricts us from seeing this larger energetic blessing that we have. And we have that in all of those little, what we feel are minute and meaningless connections that actually begin to be huge in our lives. And it isn't until we have that reflecting back that we see that. And so I think about, as we're bringing this podcast to a close, you know, when we look at some of the things of how do we get what we want? How do we get more joy in our life this year? How do we achieve some of those things that we really want to achieve? It really does start with getting right with ourselves, the ways in which we get in our own way. Right? So Mary Beth, let's be honest, let's be raw, let's be real. How do you get in your own way?
You know, I do it every day. I do it multiple times a day, you know, where we try, for example, my husband and I, you know, we're very serious about trying to do healthy eating. And
then you go get Diet Coke through the drive-through.
Right. But you know what? There are worse addictions. So, and not feeling shame about that.
I'm not giving you shame. No shame. You own it.
We tease each other, my husband and I do, about this all the time, about how we kind of get in the way of what we're trying to do. But, you know, then we make a mistake or we just make a choice or who knows what it is that we're like, oh crap, that's gonna. And I said to him, you know what? We can't let all this derail us. We have to just say it's a bump in the road. We keep on going because life is about the bumps in the road. And so look, I make mistakes all the time with my adult children. I say things I shouldn't have said, and many times they call me on it. They'll say, well, whatever. I mean, or they make fun of me because whatever it happens to be. But I make mistakes all the time. But I always say, I know my heart is in the right place. I know I want the good for these people. And one of the things I think about in the morning when I get up is I do believe God wants us to celebrate life. I believe it. But, sometimes that good, right? Maybe you are not feeling the good, but you say to yourself, Lord, help me be the good for somebody else today. And that might just be what you said, the smile, or letting them cut in front of you on the road, when you want to get going, because that's one of the ways that I'm always wanting to go, 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 go. So I derail myself sometimes by I'm not letting that guy in. Are you kidding me? Here he has been coming up here and he has to get in, but he's wanting to get ahead of everybody. And my husband will say to me, just let it go, Mary Beth. He reminds me, no, let the guy in. But instead, I let that mentality of, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. And I'm very rule-based. So when I think, no, buddy, you were supposed to be in the right-hand lane, way, way, way back there. Don't edge yourself up here. But I just got to take a breath and let it go. So I do it daily. I do derail myself daily, but I am better at pulling it back, not beating myself up over it, and trying to move forward, because life is about moving forward.
Well, and it's also about living, right? So weigh the worth of the derailment. When you say that, and you and I have talked, it's one of the reasons why when people are focused on weight and they give me their food journals. So you ate the ice cream. I'm not like, oh, you ate the ice cream or you had the diet pop, right? I'm asking you, was it worth it in that moment? Were you there for the right reasons? I think sometimes we forget to ask ourselves, am I here derailing myself for the right reasons? Is it something I actually want to experience, or am I not dealing with something else? And in lieu of it, I'm just sabotaging myself. It really does come around to, is it worth it? And if it is, then you take the hit and you move on. And the quicker you get back on the tracks, the better off you are in setting your sights to the success. And then sometimes I think the derailment, Mary Beth, and I would say, I would use your recent position, if I could, it's something you thought you needed. It's something you thought you wanted. And it wasn't until you were in it and you were starting on that journey that you had to take the assessment of, is this the mom you should always be busy voice? Is this, I've got to have some purpose because my life has changed in my children's lives. And I have to have this sense of purpose. And until we're really willing to sit with all of that honestly and without judgment, that is the key. The key every day is sit with it, but sit with it without judgment. What is it? Where did it come from? And do I really need this right now? Does it serve me well? We have to give ourselves permission to say, nah, no, I thought it was gonna. I thought I had a good thing going here. I thought I had a good track. But now that I am, and like you said, giving myself the worth, it doesn't serve me well. So guess what? As long as you're breathing, you still have the left-hand turn. I think that's another thing, right? We get stuck. We get stuck in ourselves. We get stuck in our egos. We get stuck in those voices and past experiences and perceptions that we have, and perfection ideas instead of progression. And then we get stuck and we don't give ourselves permission to say, maybe this isn't exactly what I wanted. And it's okay for me to change. I think just as much as we say, give ourselves permission to be valued, we have to also give ourselves permission to know that sometimes we don't know what that value is until we get into the process and make adjustments,
Right.
especially when we're overwhelmed. Don't you agree, Mary Beth?
Absolutely. And Barbara Bad always used to say to me, those are your old tapes, Mary Beth. Those are your old tapes. And you keep turning them on. Those are the old messages. You are writing new messages. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I said, oh, but I'm not a quitter. Well, that's an old message because that comes with all this guilt and all these other things. So, we're trying to create new tapes to live by. So,
As we should. We're
right.
not the same people. We're different, right?
I agree. I totally, totally agree with some kernels that have never changed,
And, it's learning to work with those kernels because they've served a purpose. They're part of your survival pieces. I think that's the other message as we bring this to a close also, I will share. There are certainly things that we're not happy about that we were or we did or who we have been in our lives, but those people, they served good purposes. It's not just about seeing the people that come into our lives, Mary Beth. It's also about seeing the times in our lives when we may have not been the most proud of the things that we said or we did, and really recognizing that there was a purpose for that part, right? And learning to work with it. So even like you said, I still say the wrong things to my kids, and I certainly do that all of the time. I'm still learning how to be different. And so I'm going to work with that instead of hiding in the shame corner or pulling back in from being the prominent person that I want to be in my own life. And that is super essential. Learning to work with instead of always trying to negate the not so great parts about us and those moments of derailment, it makes all the difference in the world to building the confidence, to making you who you want to be. And it's all about that. I always say this, and I think I've said it to you. And that final moment in that last breath, there is no one there with me. So if I want to wear my fancy little hearts and I want to wear my nose, and I want to go out and try to get everybody to line dance at a networking event because it's too boring and too many suits around, I don't care what you think, because I'm good with who I am and the experience that I had. And that takes a lot of practice and a whole lot of vulnerability, to let go of that ego. Don't you agree?
Totally. We got to enjoy it. And it's the passage of time and, it's happening. So we're going to enjoy it and learn from it. And the journey's going to have its ups and downs, but that's okay.
The message you shared today, I am honored, my friend, for having you here. And as we wrap up, I'm just going to leave our guests out there in the world with a couple of things. It's important to ask yourself, what brings you back when it gets noisy, when the chaos and the clutter and the shoulds, what brings you back here? Is it practicing 10 minutes a day without having any connectivity? Is it journaling? Is it reaching out to get some help? Is it just simply connecting to nature? What brings you back? And if I can impart anything on you, take more time to do that right now as you're trying to discover what it is that you want from this year. The other thing I would say is, what is one boundary that you need to practice in order to honor your well-being in every day? When I start my day with 10 minutes of reading. I start my day with gratitude. And then the next thing I move into is, how is my day going to be fueled? Because without fuel, I don't have energy. I get a little cranky, and I certainly don't feel good about myself if I'm not fueling properly. And my image isn't what I want it to be for me, not for anyone else. And then as you're deciding what season this is for you, if you had to put a word, whether or not that word be courage, strength, joy, what is the word that you want to see develop as you set your sights on 3 goals this year? One word. If that could be what you want to see developed, what would that word be? And that's how I'll leave it here today. I thank you, Mary Beth, for joining me. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you to everyone who was here, my friends. Till the next time, let's find our way to wellness together.